The hearse can't enter, Mr. Mercer. Community policy. Claudette Briggs, president of the Lakeshore Heights HOA, stood in front of the iron gate like she owned the air itself. One manicured hand rested on the keypad. The other clutched her clipboard like a badge of power. Behind her, the marble archway gleamed under the noon sun, closed, unyielding, cruel. The rule applies to all commercial vehicles, she said, tapping the gate code pad with deliberate slowness. Even for funerals. The driver of the hearse looked at me helplessly through the windshield. My wife's coffin, mahogany, polished, too heavy for one man to carry, waited in the back, the reflection of its brass handles winking like eyes that deserved better. I stepped forward. "Claudette, open it." She didn't flinch. "Without HOA authorization, I'd be violating Section 12. You'll thank me later when your property value doesn't tank." The cameras on the corners blinked red. She was recording me, turning grief into evidence. I leaned closer, lowering my voice. "You think this gate keeps you safe?" I said. "I designed it. That keypad still runs on firmware I helped write when this neighborhood was built." Her smirk wavered just enough for me to see the first crack. Before I continue, if you've ever watched someone abuse a rule just to prove they could, hit that subscribe button now. Because this one, it doesn't end with a fine. It ends in court, live. My name's Daniel Mercer. I'm a structural engineer. I don't yell. I don't threaten. I build things that last longer than people's egos. But this place, this gate, was supposed to protect families, not trap them behind power games. My wife, Emily, wanted to come home one last time. Her final wish was to rest beneath the oak tree she planted 15 years ago, the one that still drops acorns on the porch she painted by hand. The paramedics had called it peaceful when she passed, just a breath leaving quietly. But nothing about this moment was peaceful. Claudette stood between me and a promise. Behind me, the line of cars carrying flowers, friends, and silence stretched down the street. Every minute the gate stayed closed, the air grew heavier. Claudette glanced at her watch. "You can leave it at the entrance," she said, voice sharp with false sympathy. "We'll arrange for local transport if it meets HOA standards." "You're not touching her," I said. My voice came out lower than I expected, almost calm, like a man holding back a storm. A sprinkler hissed behind me. Neighbors peeked through their blinds. Some filmed, others turned away. I could hear whispers. "It's about the gate. He should have filled the form. The HOA doesn't make exceptions." I didn't move. The hearse engine idled, a low growl under the Florida heat. When the gate stayed shut, I realized the truth. Claudette wasn't enforcing policy. She was performing. Control. Lakeshore Heights had become her stage, and my wife's coffin was her prop. For a moment, I thought about forcing it. The gate mechanism wasn't built to withstand pressure. I could have broken the lock with a wrench in 2 minutes. But Emily hated scenes. She'd told me once, "You can win without shouting, Danny. Just know how the system really works." So, I took a breath and stepped back. "You'll regret this," I said quietly. Claudette smiled. "Regret is for people without power." The driver rolled down his window. "Sir, do we—" "Wait." I was shaking, but not from grief anymore, from focus. Every bolt in that gate, every wire running under its keypad, was mapped in my memory. I'd signed off on the design back when the neighborhood partnered with the city, which meant one thing Claudette didn't know. Half that system still belonged to Clearwater's Public Works Department. The emergency override she thought she controlled wasn't hers to touch. She turned away, pretending to type something into her clipboard, pretending this was routine. I knew then this wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. She wanted to make me small before everyone. The driver sighed and shifted into reverse. The sound of gravel crunching under tires felt like something breaking inside me. Emily's coffin glinted once under the sunlight before the hearse turned toward the main road, away from home. I stood there until the dust settled, staring at the locked gate, at Claudette's pastel blazer fading into the guardhouse shadows. The marble arch above her read, "Lakeshore Heights, a community of grace." Grace. That word would end up engraved on the plaque I'd built right here months later, after the trial, after the cameras, after the verdict that made sure no gate in this county could ever be locked like that again. Because that's what happens when you give a man who builds systems a reason to dismantle one. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the coffin turning away from the gate, taillights shrinking against the horizon. By morning, the world had moved on, but the gate still stood there, silent, unrepentant, gleaming under the sunrise like nothing had happened. I stepped onto my porch, coffee gone cold in my hand. A yellow envelope sat wedged in my mailbox. HOA lettering. My stomach tightened before I even opened it. Inside was a citation for non-compliance with community access policy, unauthorized funeral procession. The fine, $500. The signature, Claudette Briggs. I laughed once. It didn't sound human. Across the street, two neighbors were trimming their hedges, pretending not to look. When I raised the envelope slightly, one of them, Mark, a retired firefighter, shook his head. "She's done worse," he muttered under his breath. "What do you mean?" I asked. "She locked the EMTs out last month," he said. "Said the ambulance siren was disruptive. The guy at 212 didn't make it. He stopped trimming and looked away. Nobody talks about it. They're scared." Scared of what? A woman with a clipboard? But standing there, in that perfect neighborhood of beige walls and manicured grass, I understood. Fear doesn't always come from violence. Sometimes it comes from control, fines, letters, public shaming. Claudette ruled this place like a petty kingdom, and everyone bowed. I walked to the end of the street where the marble arch loomed. The security booth was empty, the monitors still humming inside. I could see my reflection in the tinted glass, half of my face in shadow. My wife used to say this place felt like a movie set, too perfect to be real. Now, it just felt like a lie. Behind me, a golf cart rolled up. It was Terrell Nash, the HOA security supervisor. His uniform was pressed, but his eyes looked tired. "Morning, Mr. Mercer," he said, stopping near the curb. "Morning," I replied. "You were here yesterday." He hesitated. "I was." His gaze flicked toward the cameras on the gatepost. "I'm sorry for what happened, but she runs everything through those systems. I can't open it without her approval. You record everything, right?" He froze. "That's standard policy. For liability. I'll need a copy of yesterday's footage." "I can't." His hand tightened on the steering wheel. "All video goes to HOA storage. Claudette reviews it first." He lowered his voice. "And she deletes what she doesn't like." For a second, we just looked at each other. He wasn't my enemy. He was another cog in her machine, too afraid to jam it. "Terrell," I said quietly, "I helped to design that system. You know the camera units have dual output feeds. There's an archive backup." His head turned slightly, eyes narrowing. "You shouldn't say that out loud here," he whispered. "These walls have ears." He drove off, leaving me standing in the exhaust haze, but his words lingered. If the HOA really deleted evidence, there was something bigger beneath the surface. This wasn't about a funeral. It was about control, power, and fear. Back home, I spread Claudette's letter across the kitchen counter next to the condolence cards. The contrast made me sick. I started jotting notes, drawing the structure of the gate's access network from memory. Claudette's authority wasn't infinite. It was built on systems I understood better than anyone. A knock broke my concentration. When I opened the door, my neighbor Linda Harper, clutching her morning paper, glanced around nervously before speaking. "You didn't hear this from me," she whispered, "but she told the board you caused a scene and violated protocol. She's adding another fine for harassment if you appeal." "Appeal what?" "Existing penalty. She called it disruptive mourning." Linda's voice cracked. "I'm sorry, Daniel. People are scared to side with you. She's threatened to revoke pool access and lawn privileges." I stared at her, speechless. This wasn't a homeowners association anymore. It was a small government built on intimidation. After she left, I sat at the table staring at Emily's favorite mug beside my untouched coffee. The gate, the fines, the silence. All of it felt personal now. She'd planted that oak tree for life, not bureaucracy. And I'd be damned if her last wish ended with a letter in my mailbox. I picked up my phone and took a photo of the citation, then another of the gate through my kitchen window. Documentation wasn't vengeance. It was the first brick in something bigger. That night, I drove past the neighborhood border and parked by the lake. The reflection of the gate lights shimmered across the water. From the other side, The place looked like a prison, built for people who didn't know they were trapped. I made myself a promise right there, under the sound of cicadas and wind. I would find proof, real, undeniable proof that she broke more than hearts, that she broke the law, because gates can keep people out, but they can't keep the truth from getting in. The next morning, the lake mist clung to the road as I walked toward the HOA office. The building sat at the far end of the cul-de-sac, a spotless glass cube with fake ferns by the door, and security cameras pointed like eyes that never blinked. Inside, fluorescent light hummed above the marble counter. Claudette wasn't there, but Terrell Nash was. He was behind the front desk, tapping at a keyboard, shoulders slightly hunched. His uniform looked the same, but something in his posture had changed, like he was carrying something too heavy to name. When he saw me, his hands froze over the keys. "Mr. Mercer?" he said quietly. "You shouldn't be here. I set the HOA citation on the counter between us. She fined me for grief. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to see the policy she's quoting." Terrell's eyes darted toward the camera above the doorway, then back to me. "You know how this works," he muttered. "All requests go through her office. And if she's the one breaking the policy?" His jaw flexed. He didn't answer. Instead, he pressed a folder flat against the desk and started organizing papers that didn't need organizing. His movements were stiff, mechanical, an attempt to look busy, not guilty. "Terrell," I said softly, "you were there that day." He swallowed hard. "I'm not supposed to talk about incidents under board review. That's not an incident. That was my wife's funeral." The sentence landed like a brick between us. His shoulders dropped, the act dissolving. He looked down at the papers, eyes unfocused, lips tightening. "She said it was just policy," he murmured, more to himself than to me. "Said it wasn't personal. She made it personal the moment she locked that gate." He rubbed his temple with 2 fingers, a nervous tick I hadn't noticed before. "You don't understand, Mr. Mercer. Everything here is recorded. Calls, entries, security footage. But she reviews all of it first. If something makes her look bad, it disappears." "So you've seen her delete footage?" He hesitated. His foot tapped once, twice, against the floor. "I'm not saying that," he whispered. The lie was written in the way he couldn't meet my eyes. I didn't need him to confess outright. His body already had. Behind the glass, the gated street shimmered with morning heat. The same gate that held my wife's coffin captive now looked smaller, fragile, almost pathetic. I turned back to him. "Terrell, do you have kids?" He blinked. "A daughter," he said after a pause. "She's 9. Then you know what it feels like to promise her she'll always be safe, and what it means when someone abuses the rules that are supposed to protect her." His throat tightened. He leaned back in his chair and stared at the screen, but his fingers hovered over the keyboard without moving. The silence stretched until it felt like another weight pressing on both of us. Finally, he said, "You didn't hear this from me." He pulled open a drawer, shuffled through folders, then slid one toward me just far enough for me to glimpse the corner of a maintenance report stamped with the city logo. Before I could read it, he yanked it back. "That's all I can show, not a copy, not a photo, just proof that she's been altering more than gate access." My pulse quickened. "So it's true, she tampered with city systems." His mouth twitched, but he didn't speak. His hand trembled slightly as he pushed the folder back into the drawer. When he closed it, he exhaled like someone who'd just broken a commandment. "I could lose my job," he said finally. "My pension. She's vindictive. You have no idea." "I do," I said quietly. "I buried my wife on a sidewalk because of her rules." For a moment, we just stood there, 2 men trapped in different ways. His fear wasn't cowardice. It was survival. Claudette's power didn't come from force. It came from everyone's silence. He rubbed his thumb along the edge of the counter, eyes unfocused. "There's a system backup," he muttered, barely audible. "An archive feed from the old city contract. I shouldn't know that. You didn't hear it from me." Then he straightened suddenly, eyes flicking toward the office door. The sharp click of heels echoed in the hallway, Claudette's unmistakable rhythm. Terrell's face drained of color. He adjusted his tie, forced a professional smile, and stepped back from the counter like we'd been discussing parking permits. "Morning, gentlemen," Claudette said, sweeping into the room in her pastel blazer, perfume slicing through the sterile air. "Mr. Mercer, still making trouble, I see." I turned slowly. Just following policy, ma'am. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Good. You'll find compliance makes life easier. When she turned to lecture someone on the phone, I glanced once at Terrell. His hands were folded tight, knuckles white, lips pressed thin, but his eyes, just for a second, met mine, and in that flicker was something raw, guilt, fear, and maybe the start of courage. I walked out without another word. The door shut behind me, and through the glass I saw him slump back into his chair, elbows on knees, staring at the floor. He'd given me enough to know where to start, and Claudette didn't realize it yet, but the weakest man in her office had just cracked her entire foundation. I didn't head home after leaving the HOA office. Instead, I parked at the far end of the cul-de-sac and sat there watching the board meeting through the glass walls. Claudette loved transparency, but only the kind she controlled. Residents gathered inside like obedient jurors, nodding at every word she said. I could see Terrell standing by the door, motionless, his face locked into a neutral mask. Through the open windows, her voice carried out clearly. "We must protect the integrity of Lakeshore Heights," Claudette declared. "Negative attention reflects poorly on all of us." She was spinning the funeral debacle into propaganda. I watched her raise a printed photo, my wife's hearse parked outside the gate, the coffin faintly visible through tinted glass. "This," she said dramatically, "is why strict enforcement matters. Compassion without discipline leads to chaos." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. My hand clenched on the steering wheel. It wasn't enough that she humiliated me. She was turning my loss into a lesson plan. I stepped out of the truck. A soft wind rustled through the palm fronds. I could feel the weight of every eye inside that meeting shift as I approached the door. Claudette noticed me halfway down the walkway. For the first time, her expression faltered. "Mr. Mercer," she said as I entered, "this is a private session." "Open windows and community attendance," I said evenly. "Looks public to me." Her jaw tightened. "We're reviewing internal matters. You're not authorized to speak." "Then consider this a resident's statement." Before she could object, I took the floor. "You all saw what happened," I said, scanning the room. "My wife's funeral was denied entry because of a rule that doesn't exist in any city code or emergency statute. And if it can happen to me, it can happen to you." Several neighbors avoided my eyes. Claudette smiled thinly. "Mr. Mercer is grieving," she said in her practiced tone. "We extend sympathy, but the board followed proper policy." "What policy? The one that says human decency stops at the gate?" She sighed loudly, performing exasperation. "Our decisions protect property values, not feelings. You'd be surprised how quickly bad press can hurt this neighborhood." I almost laughed. She was terrified of bad press. That was her weakness. I glanced at the camera mounted on the wall and spoke directly toward it. "If you think that gate's protecting anyone, you might want to ask the family of the man at 212 who died waiting for an ambulance last month." The silence that followed was absolute. Claudette froze, mask cracking for the briefest second. I saw Terrell flinch near the back, his hand twitching toward the exit. "Where did you hear that?" she demanded. "From your own residence." "That's hearsay." "Then release the incident report. Show everyone the footage." Her smile vanished. "Meeting adjourned," she snapped. "Security, please escort Mr. Mercer out." Terrell hesitated. His eyes flicked from her to me, then to the residents whispering among themselves. Claudette barked his name. He straightened, opened the door slowly, and gestured toward the exit without saying a word. As I walked out, I turned back to the crowd. "You're all fine with this?" I said. "You let her lock out ambulances, funerals, anyone she doesn't like. And you call that order?" No one answered, but a few looked away in shame. That was enough. Doubt had entered the room. Outside, the evening sky had turned amber. I stood beside my truck, watching through the glass as Claudette launched into another speech, voice sharp and desperate. She was losing control, and she knew it. When Terrell came out a few minutes later, he didn't meet my eyes, but his shoulders were shaking slightly, hands jammed deep in his pockets. "You shouldn't have said that in there," he muttered. "She'll come after you now." "She already did," I said. "Now, I'm just returning the favor." He nodded once, like a man who agreed but couldn't admit it out loud. Then he drove off, tires crunching against the gravel. I leaned against my truck and stared at the reflection of the marble archway in the window. The gate lights flickered on, their hum filling the silence like a warning. I thought about Emily again, how she believed justice always began small, with one person refusing to stay quiet. I pulled out my phone and opened the city's public records portal. If Claudette's power came from invisibility, I'd shine a floodlight on it. I searched for Lakeshore Heights infrastructure, emergency access permit. One result appeared, last modified 2 years ago. Contractor, Briggs Residential Systems. Her name was right there, written into the city's system like a signature on a crime scene. I took a screenshot and smiled for the first time in weeks. Claudette wanted silence. She was about to get headlines instead. The screenshot of Claudette's contractor file sat open on my laptop screen like a fuse waiting for a spark. Briggs Residential Systems. She hadn't even bothered to hide behind another name. The contract gave her exclusive maintenance, rights over the community gate, signed and approved by the city clerk 2 years ago. She had turned municipal property into her personal stronghold. By late afternoon, I was in my office downtown, surrounded by blueprints and coffee cups. The hum of the drafting printer filled the room, steady and low, the sound of logic fighting chaos. I pulled the original gate design file from my archives, a schematic I'd submitted when Lakeshore Heights was first built. There it was. Emergency access override, controlled by Clearwater Public Works. That clause alone meant Claudette had broken state code. Every gated community connected to public roads must keep an emergency entry channel for fire, police, and medical units. Disabling it wasn't just unethical, it was criminal obstruction. I printed both the city permit and my schematic and laid them side by side on the table. Her signature was on one, mine was on the other. 2 lines, 2 people, 2 very different reasons for building a gate. I called the Clearwater Department of Public Works. The receptionist transferred me to Inspector Laura Keene, a woman whose voice carried the flat calm of someone who'd heard every excuse in the book. "You're saying a private contractor modified a municipal access line?" she asked. "Yes," I said, steady. "I designed the original infrastructure. The override was supposed to remain under city control." There was a pause, then the sound of typing. "Do you have proof?" "I have blueprints, contracts, and a digital record of the change order filed by Claudette Briggs under a non-existent subcontractor code." That caught her attention. "Send me everything," she said. "If what you're describing is accurate, that's a violation of Section 8-3 OS-15, obstruction of public easement. It's a serious charge." I forwarded every file I had, watching the progress bar crawl across the screen. For the first time in weeks, I felt momentum. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about accountability. An hour later, Inspector Keene called back. "I've verified your permit. The city's control node for Lakeshore Heights was disconnected from our network 18 months ago. The override was rerouted to a private server. Can you trace it?" "Yes," she said. "And guess whose business address hosts that server?" I didn't need to guess, she continued. "We'll initiate a field inspection. But, Mr. Mercer, I need to warn you. If she realizes we're investigating, she might destroy digital evidence. We'll need local confirmation before we move in." I thought of Terrell, his trembling hands, the way his eyes darted toward the cameras. He had the access they'd need. "You'll get it," I said. After the call ended, I stared out the window at the city skyline. The light was shifting gold, that fleeting hour before dusk when everything looks clean for just a moment. Emily used to call it forgiveness light. I wished. She could see what was happening now, how her last wish was becoming a turning point for something bigger. When I returned to the neighborhood that evening, a security truck was parked near the gate. Terrell stood beside it, talking into his radio. Claudette was nowhere in sight. I pulled over, grabbed the folder from my passenger seat, and walked toward him. He saw me and tensed. "You shouldn't be here right now," he said, eyes scanning the street. "Then it's a good thing I'm not here," I replied, handing him the folder. "City inspector's name and contact. They're investigating the gate modifications. If they call you, tell them the truth." His face went pale. "She'll fire me." "Maybe," I said, "but she can't erase the truth from a state investigation. You'll be protected." He looked down at the folder, thumb running along the edge of the manila paper. "You really think they'll come?" "They're already coming," I said. "And when they do, every second of that funeral footage will matter." Terrell nodded slowly, then tucked the folder under his arm. The last of the sunlight caught the corner of his badge, a flicker of gold on his chest. "If she finds out," he said quietly. "I was never here." "You were doing your job," I said. "That's all anyone needs to know." He gave a short, broken laugh and climbed back into his truck. I watched him drive off toward the guardhouse, his brake lights blinking twice before he disappeared around the corner. A signal, maybe, or just hesitation. Either way, the line was drawn. Claudette had the gate, but now I had the law. The next morning, I drove straight to Clearwater's municipal complex. The building was all glass and gray steel, a mirror of everything Claudette pretended Lakeshore Heights stood for: order, image, perfection. Inside, the corridors smelled like coffee and printer ink. The front desk clerk handed me a visitor's badge and directed me to the Infrastructure Enforcement Division. Inspector Laura Keene met me in a narrow office lined with rolled-up blueprints. She had that kind of calm that came from knowing the rules down to the letter. "Mr. Mercer," she said, gesturing to a chair, "I've reviewed your files. You weren't exaggerating." She slid a printed report across the desk. Claudette's company, Briggs Residential Systems, had submitted falsified maintenance certifications for 2 years. She replaced the public override with a proprietary gate system that can't be accessed by emergency dispatch, Laura said. "That's illegal on 3 separate counts: obstruction of emergency infrastructure, falsifying public records, and unlawful modification of municipal equipment." I exhaled slowly. "Then it's official." "Yes, but we can't just issue a citation. We'll need an on-site inspection with confirmed witness cooperation before prosecution." "That meant Terrell," I nodded. "He's ready." She studied me carefully. "You realize this will trigger a criminal investigation, not just an HOA penalty. If she's as controlling as you describe, she'll retaliate." "She already did," I said. "This time, she won't win." Laura handed me a small envelope. "This is the formal inspection order. Don't tell anyone you have it until my team arrives." When I left the office, the city skyline shimmered in the noon heat. Cars rolled by, unaware that one neighborhood's iron gate was about to turn into a legal earthquake. By the time I reached home, there was another letter in my mailbox. The envelope was thick, embossed with the HOA's seal. Inside was a notice of violation for defamatory conduct against the board, and a threat to suspend my community privileges. Claudette's message was clear: back down or be erased. I sat on the porch, the letter crumpled in my hand, and looked across the yard at the oak tree Emily planted. Sunlight filtered through its branches, scattering tiny gold flecks over the grass. I remembered her saying once, "Every root fights for light. That's how things survive." That night, I met Terrell at the all-night diner off Highway 41. He was already there, seated in a booth near the window, hat pulled low, coffee untouched. His posture was stiff, eyes red from lack of sleep. "She's suspicious," he said quietly. "Asked if anyone's been asking questions about the gate logs. I told her no." "You did right," I said. "But I need one last thing from you." He looked up, wary. "You want the footage." "I want confirmation the system backup still exists. If the city team can't access it during inspection, they'll need your statement." He rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding my eyes. "That backup feed, she made me disconnect it from the main server, but I didn't delete it. It's stored in the secondary archive, old system, external drive. It still pings every 72 hours. You still have access?" "Maybe, but if she finds out, I'm done." I leaned forward. "If you don't, everyone in that neighborhood stays under her thumb, including your daughter." That landed harder than I meant it to. His hands trembled slightly as he lifted the mug and set it back down without drinking. "You really think she'll go down for this?" "She disabled emergency access. Someone died because of it. The city's not going to let that slide." He sighed and nodded once. "A man past the point of running. Then I'll meet them, but I want this off the record." "It will be," I promised. As he stood to leave, I noticed how his reflection in the diner window seemed smaller than the man himself, bent, hollowed out by fear. Yet there was something in his eyes now that hadn't been there before. Resolve. The next day I called Inspector Keene. "You'll have your witness," I told her. "He's ready." "Good," she said. Then we moved tomorrow, at dawn. When I hung up, I stood by the window watching the gated street beyond my yard. The lights along the arch flickered as the system reset its nightly cycle, a quiet heartbeat of control. Tomorrow, those lights would be evidence, Tomorrow, the gate that humiliated me would open for the last time under her rule. Dawn broke over Lakeshore Heights with the kind of stillness that usually means something is about to crack. The city's white utility van pulled up quietly outside the marble gate, the logo of Clearwater Public Works barely visible in the mist. 2 inspectors stepped out, clipboards in hand, followed by Inspector Laura Keene. Her gaze was steady, precise. Today was the day Claudette's control met the law. I waited across the street by the fountain, heart pounding under a thin layer of calm. Terrell's truck was already there, parked awkwardly near the curb. He sat behind the wheel, gripping the steering column so tightly his knuckles were white. I could see the debate flickering in his posture, loyalty versus conscience, fear versus duty. Laura approached him. "Mr. Nash, you're the on-site security supervisor?" He nodded once, swallowed hard, and stepped out. His uniform looked ironed, but his body language betrayed him, shoulders hunched, eyes darting toward the gatehouse cameras. "Yes, ma'am," he said quietly. "We're here to inspect the electronic access system. We've confirmed multiple permit discrepancies." His jaw tightened. "I know." He hesitated, then added, "I've known for a while." Laura exchanged a glance with her partner. "Are you saying you were aware of the modifications?" Terrell's breath hitched. "She ordered them, said it was for efficiency, but it locked out the city override. I told her it wasn't right." "You documented your objections?" He looked down, rubbing the back of his neck. "Not in writing. You don't keep records when you work for Claudette Briggs. You keep your job by pretending not to see." The inspectors began setting up diagnostic equipment, connecting a cable to the gate terminal. The soft beeping filled the air, sharp against the quiet. Terrell watched them with visible tension, one hand twitching at his side, the other gripping his belt like he needed something to hold on to. "She's going to find out," he muttered. "She always finds out." Laura's tone softened. "Mr. Nash, what matters now is truth. You can help us make sure no one else pays for her negligence." His breathing quickened. He looked at me for the first time that morning, eyes red-rimmed, pleading for some kind of permission. I gave a small nod. Terrell exhaled, a tremor running through him. "The day she locked that gate," he said, voice barely above a whisper, "I saw her override the system manually. She wanted to delay the procession so she could set an example." I heard her laughing afterward. Laura froze. "You're certain?" He nodded quickly. "Yes. The system logs record every manual override, but she deletes them from the main file. There's a second server, one she doesn't know I kept connected. The backup feed still runs on a 72-hour loop. It has everything." "Where is it?" "In the maintenance shed," he said, pointing toward a small outbuilding by the east wall. "Buried under an old control panel. It's the original unit from when the community was built. Still powered, still pinging the city line." Laura turned to her team. "Retrieve it, carefully." The inspectors moved fast. Within minutes, they carried out a small gray server box coated in dust. Terrell's eyes followed every motion, the fear in his expression shifting slowly into disbelief, as if seeing the truth dragged into daylight for the first time made it real. "This contains the footage?" Laura asked. "Yes," he said. "Not just the funeral, all of it, every time she denied entry, every call she intercepted." She sealed the unit in an evidence bag. "Mr. Nash, you understand this is a formal confession?" He looked down at his hands, trembling slightly. "I do. I can't keep covering for her. Not after what she did." Laura gave him a long, measured look. "You did the right thing today." He nodded, eyes shining, voice cracking. "Maybe, but it won't feel like it when she finds out." I stepped closer. "She'll find out in court, Terrell. Not before." He laughed softly, a sound half relief, half exhaustion. "Then I guess we're both free now." The inspectors finished loading their equipment and drove off toward the city. Terrell stood there for a long moment, hands in his pockets, staring at the empty street like it was something entirely new. When he finally got back in his truck, he didn't start the engine right away. He just sat there, breathing slowly, the faintest trace of a smile crossing his face, small, defiant, and utterly human. Terrell's truck disappeared around the corner, leaving a silence that felt almost sacred. The inspector's van turned down the main road toward Clearwater, carrying the little gray box that could topple an empire. I stood there beside the marble arch, staring at the gate Claudette had turned into her throne, The hum of its motor was still steady, unaware its days of obedience were numbered. By noon, news had already begun to circulate. Someone, probably one of the residents who witnessed the inspection, had posted a photo online of the city van outside the community. The caption read, "Lakeshore Heights under investigation for illegal gate control." Within hours, it spread across local forums, homeowners sharing their own stories of policy abuse and security harassment. For the first time, Claudette's fortress wasn't silent. It was buzzing with doubt. I spent the afternoon at home, phone buzzing nonstop. Messages from neighbors, reporters, even a few people from City Hall asking for statements. I didn't respond to any of them. This wasn't the time to gloat. This was the time to prepare. On my dining table lay a spread of documents, blueprints, screenshots, letters, and the inspection report draft that Inspector Keene had sent me. The evidence was overwhelming. Claudette had tampered with city systems, falsified maintenance logs, and issued fines using a permit she had forged. But what gave the case real weight wasn't paper. It was people. Terrell's confession had turned this from a property dispute into a criminal investigation. At 3 o'clock, my phone rang. The caller ID read, "Clearwater City Attorney's Office." I answered immediately. "Mr. Mercer," said a voice on the other end. "This is Deputy Attorney Marcus Lang. We've received the inspection footage and backup data from your site. It's conclusive. Ms. Briggs rerouted emergency infrastructure without authorization and deleted multiple access logs, including one linked to a medical delay that resulted in a fatality." I gripped the phone tighter. "What happens now?" "The state's filing preliminary charges. We'll need a formal witness statement from you and Mr. Nash. There will be a public notice of investigation by tomorrow morning. We expect it to make the local news." I let out a long breath. "She'll see this coming." Lang's tone was measured. "Good. Let her. You've done your part, Mr. Mercer. The rest belongs to the system she tried to manipulate." After the call ended, I went outside. The sun was dipping low, staining the lake with a rust-colored glow. Across the street, a few residents stood in small groups whispering. Their faces were tense but curious. People who'd lived under quiet fear for years, now sensing something shifting in the air. One of them, Linda Harper, waved me over. "Daniel, is it true?" she asked in a low voice. "They say the city found proof she tampered with emergency systems." "It's true," I said. "The city's taking over the gate." She pressed a hand to her mouth. "Oh my God. She always said the city couldn't touch us, that we were private." "She lied," I said simply. "And now she's about to find out how public her actions really are." Linda nodded slowly, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. "Maybe now people can stop being scared." As I walked back toward my driveway, a car door slammed behind me, Claudette's silver SUV. She strode across the pavement, fury carved into every step. "You've been busy, Mr. Mercer," she said sharply. "Enjoying your little crusade?" "I don't enjoy funerals," I said, turning to face her. "You think you can ruin me with your paperwork?" she hissed. "This community answers to its board, not the city." I didn't bother arguing. Instead, I took my phone from my pocket and held it up. "Say that again," I said. "The press might want to hear it." For a split second, she looked stunned. Then the mask snapped back on. "You'll regret this," she said, stepping closer. "Everything you care about will crumble. They always do when people try to fight me." "Maybe," I said, "but gates don't stay locked forever." Her mouth opened to retort, but a voice called from behind us. "Ms. Briggs!" It was one of the board members, rushing down the street with a phone in hand. "It's all over the news. They're talking about the illegal override. The city's confirmed the charges." Claudette turned pale. Her hands trembled as she grabbed the phone, reading the headline aloud under her breath. I caught a few words: criminal obstruction, investigation, footage. I walked past her toward my house, the air thick with the weight of reversal. For the first time since Emily's funeral, I didn't feel powerless. The system she'd used to humiliate me was now turning its spotlight directly on her. As the evening lights flickered on across Lakeshore Heights, I knew this wasn't over. Tomorrow would bring hearings, lawyers, maybe cameras. But the balance had shifted. Claudette Briggs had ruled through silence, and now the entire county was listening. By sunrise, the entire neighborhood was buzzing. News vans lined the outer road, their antennas cutting the fog like spears. The gate, once Claudette's symbol of order, was now wrapped in yellow caution tape. A city emblem hung from the keypad box, stamped with the words, "Property under investigation." It felt like justice wearing steel boots. I stood across the street beside the oak tree Emily had planted, the one that had witnessed everything. Reporters were setting up lights near the archway. Neighbors clustered on sidewalks, whispering, pretending they weren't waiting for the spectacle. Claudette's SUV appeared first. She drove faster than usual, almost reckless. When she stepped out, she wasn't the immovable queen of Lakeshore Heights anymore. She was brittle, pale, moving in sharp jerks like every gesture might shatter her authority. She barked something at the security guard, but the man only pointed to the city notice posted on the gate. Her authority had already been revoked. Terrell arrived a few minutes later in his work truck. He didn't wear his uniform. Instead, he had on a plain blue shirt, sleeves rolled up, sweat glistening on his forehead, even in the cool morning air. He walked straight to the inspection site, past the residents, past Claudette, who froze when she saw him. "You!" she spat, voice trembling with fury. "You did this!" He didn't respond, just kept walking until he reached me. His face was steady now, no longer burdened with guilt. "They called me in to verify system logs," he said quietly. "Inspector Keen's team is pulling the archive feed today." "Are you ready?" I asked. He nodded once. "It's time." The city van rolled up behind us. Inspector Keen stepped out, carrying a folder, thick, with printed reports. She gave a brief nod to both of us, then addressed the small crowd. "Residents of Lakeshore Heights," she began, her voice amplified by the hum of microphones. "This inspection has revealed unlawful modification of emergency infrastructure. These gates were rerouted to a private server controlled by Ms. Claudette Briggs in direct violation of municipal access laws." Gasps rippled through the gathering. Claudette's face went white. "That's a lie!" she shouted. "This man," she pointed at me, "is feeding you false data. He's obsessed, unstable." Keen ignored her and turned to Terrell. "Mr. Nash, can you confirm this unit was reprogrammed manually?" He nodded and placed a small flash drive in her hand. "These are the logs from the backup archive. It records every override for the past 2 years. You'll find her credentials on every single one." For a long moment, no one spoke. The air buzzed with camera shutters. Claudette's composure cracked completely. "You think this makes you heroes?" she shouted, stepping closer, voice sharp and desperate. "You're destroying your own community." Keen faced her evenly. "No, ma'am. You did that yourself." The crowd stirred again, neighbors murmuring, some even clapping quietly. Claudette turned to them, searching for a friendly face. But there were none left. The same people who once feared her now looked at her with disgust. A city worker disconnected the gate's control box, the soft click echoing like the closing of a chapter. The metal barrier began to slide open, slow, deliberate, final. It wasn't just a gate opening. It was power leaving her hands. I felt Emily beside me in that moment, not in words but in the hush that followed. Every second of humiliation, every silent night since that funeral had led here. Claudette took a step back, trembling. "You can't just take my system," she said, voice cracking. "It's private property." Keen's tone remained professional. "You used municipal wiring and obstructed public easements. This gate belongs to the people now." The van doors opened, and 2 officers approached, calm but firm. One read her rights aloud as she stood frozen, clipboard slipping from her grasp. Papers scattered across the road, fluttering like torn feathers. Terrell turned away, eyes wet. "Didn't think it'd actually happen," he said softly. "It had to," I replied. "Someone had to end it." As Claudette was escorted to the patrol car, the cameras swarmed her, microphones thrust forward. She tried to speak, but her voice was drowned by the sound of the gate completing its final motion. Fully open, the sunlight pouring through. For the first time since Emily's passing, Lakeshore Heights didn't look like a prison. It looked like a place where people might finally breathe again. Terrell reached out his hand. "Guess that's it," he said. I shook it firmly. "No," I said. "That's the beginning." The courtroom was colder than I expected. Rows of polished wooden benches reflected the overhead lights. Cameras lined the back wall, and the state seal gleamed above the judge's bench like an unblinking eye. I sat near the front beside Inspector Keen and Deputy Attorney Marcus Lang, the city's lead prosecutor. Beside them, a stack of printed exhibits. The evidence Terrell and I had spent weeks gathering waited for its moment to speak. Claustrophobic silence filled the room as Claudette Briggs was led in by her attorney. Her pastel suit looked less like confidence now, and more like armor. She refused to look at me as she took her seat at the defendant's table, eyes fixed on the judge. For years, she'd ruled over this community with impunity. Now she couldn't even raise her chin. Court is now in session, the bailiff announced. State of Florida versus Claudette Briggs, case number 22147. Charges including obstruction of emergency infrastructure, falsification of public records, and criminal negligence resulting in endangerment. The words echoed like thunder. Claudette flinched for the first time. Marcus Lang rose. Your Honor, the state will demonstrate that the defendant knowingly disabled municipal emergency systems, caused measurable harm to residents, and willfully obstructed access during a funeral procession for the late Emily Mercer. Hearing Emily's name spoken in that room hit me like a tremor through my ribs. She was why I was there. She was why this all had to end publicly, not quietly. The first witness was Inspector Keene. Calm and clinical, she walked the jury through the city permit, the tampered gate control board, and the data from the backup archive. Then she played the footage, grainy but clear, of Claudette manually overriding the gate while the hearse waited outside. Her voice could be heard faintly in the recording. Let him sweat a little. Rules are rules. The room froze. Even Claudette's lawyer looked stunned. Marcus turned to the judge. Your Honor, that audio alone satisfies intent. Next came Terrell Nash. He walked to the witness stand like a man walking toward redemption, not punishment. His hands trembled slightly when he took the oath, but his voice didn't. I worked for her for 4 years, he said. She told me to delete every entry that made her look bad. I knew it was wrong, but I was afraid. Until that day at the funeral. He paused, eyes flicking toward me briefly. That was the day I realized silence is just another form of guilt. Claudette's lawyer tried to undermine him, calling him a disgruntled employee, but it backfired when Marcus displayed the pay discrepancy logs. Claudette had been paying herself triple the contracted maintenance budget, funneling HOA funds through her company. The jury whispered among themselves. Claudette's mask was crumbling in real time. When it was my turn to testify, I stood, buttoned my jacket, and took the stand. My voice felt distant, but every word landed exactly where it needed to. I didn't want revenge, I said. I wanted accountability. My wife's last wish was to come home. Instead, she was left outside a gate that was never hers to be locked behind. I told them about the letter, the fines, the humiliation, about the gate's sound that haunted my nights, about the system she tampered with that endangered everyone who lived behind it. When I finished, the courtroom was silent except for the hum of the air conditioner. Claudette's attorney tried one last plea. My client was simply enforcing policy, he said weakly. She didn't intend harm. Marcus Lang stood, his voice rising with controlled fire. Intent? The only intent here was power. She turned community service into control and public safety into vanity. The judge leaned forward. I've heard enough. He reviewed the evidence briefly, then delivered the verdict. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing would follow the next morning. The cameras captured every second. As Claudette was escorted away, she glanced back, not at me, but at the open gate visible through the courthouse window. For the first time, she looked small. Terrell exhaled beside me. It's really over, he whispered. I shook my head slightly. Not yet, I said. Tomorrow's the sentence. That's when we make sure it never happens again. The courtroom lights dimmed as the crowd dispersed. Outside, reporters gathered under the courthouse steps, their microphones flashing like lightning. The story had escaped the gates, and there was no locking it away now. By morning, the courthouse steps looked like a battlefield of cameras. Reporters lined both sides of the walkway, microphones raised like bayonets. Residents from Lakeshore Heights had shown up in clusters, some out of curiosity, others because they needed to see it with their own eyes. The woman who'd ruled them through fear was about to face judgment in front of the entire county, and this time, there was no gate to hide behind. I stood near the base of the courthouse stairs, with Terrell Nash beside me. He looked uncomfortable in his pressed shirt and borrowed tie, glancing at the crowd like a man who'd wandered into the wrong story. They said they'd televise the sentencing, he murmured. Feels strange, watching justice become a show. Let them watch, I said quietly. That's what she was afraid of all along. The courthouse doors opened. Gasps rippled through the crowd as Claudette Briggs stepped outside, flanked by deputies. The pastel suits were gone. Today she wore county beige. Her hair was pulled tight, her expression unreadable. For the first time since I'd known her, she wasn't performing. Judge Everett followed behind, accompanied by the bailiff and a clerk carrying a folder, thick with documents. The press surged forward, flashes erupting. The judge raised a hand for silence. This proceeding is open to the public at the request of the victims, he announced. The court will now deliver sentencing for the case of State of Florida versus Claudette Briggs. Every camera pointed toward the podium. Claudette's lawyer stood beside her, pale and sweating. Judge Everett's voice carried across the courtyard. This case is unique not because of its legal complexity, but because of its moral simplicity. The defendant used authority meant to serve a community as a weapon of humiliation and exclusion. She obstructed emergency access, falsified municipal records, and caused immeasurable harm to those under her governance. He paused, looking directly at Claudette. Do you have anything to say before sentencing? Claudette stepped forward slowly. The crowd leaned in. I was enforcing order, she said, her voice sharp but trembling. Someone had to maintain standards. Without rules, people bring chaos. I felt a bitter laugh rise in my throat but stayed silent. The judge's expression didn't change. You speak of order, he said, but order without humanity is tyranny, and your brand of order costs lives. He read the ruling from the file. For obstruction of emergency infrastructure, 25 years. For falsifying public records, 15 years. For criminal negligence resulting in endangerment, 10 years. Sentences to be served consecutively. The murmur from the crowd swelled into a wave of reaction. 50 years. Claudette's eyes flicked toward me briefly. Anger, disbelief, maybe even fear. For the first time, the clipboard queen had no rule to hide behind, no meeting to adjourn, no fine to write. The judge continued. Furthermore, by court order, the Homeowners Association of Lakeshore Heights is hereby dissolved. All infrastructure will revert to municipal oversight. That announcement hit like a shockwave. Residents gasped, some cheered, others cried openly. Decades of silent resentment cracked into applause. Claudette turned toward them, voice breaking. You think this helps you? She shouted. Without me, your property will collapse. You'll beg for the order I gave you. A man from the crowd shouted back, We'll take our chances with freedom. The cheers grew louder. Cameras zoomed in, reporters narrating live. Claudette tried to speak again, but the deputies moved her forward. Her voice dissolved into the noise of clapping, chants, and the thunder of microphones. Terrell stood beside me, unmoving, eyes locked on her as she passed. She's really going away, he whispered. 50 years, I said softly. She'll never touch another gate again. When the deputies led her down the steps, a reporter thrust a microphone toward me. Mr. Mercer, Daniel Mercer, do you have any comment on the verdict? I looked past the flashing cameras toward the crowd, my neighbors, once silent, now standing shoulder to shoulder. This wasn't about revenge, I said. It was about accountability. My wife wanted to come home, that's all. And now, maybe this place can be one. Applause broke out again, louder this time, rippling across the courthouse plaza. Even the reporters lowered their cameras for a moment. As Claudette's transport van pulled away, I caught one last glimpse of her through the tinted glass. Expression flat, eyes empty. Then she was gone. Terrell let out a slow breath. You did it, he said. We did it, I corrected. The judge returned inside, and the crowd began to disperse. The noise faded into the distance, replaced by the sound of wind rustling through the courthouse flags. For the first time in a long time, the air felt open. Guess that's justice, Terrell said quietly. No, I replied. That's the start of peace. When the courthouse emptied, the echo of the crowd still clung to the air like static. The wind carried fragments of conversation, neighbors laughing, reporters packing up, police radios humming low. For the first time, there wasn't a gatekeeper between us and the street, just open space and sunlight. A week later, Lakeshore Heights didn't look the same. The yellow tape was gone, the city's trucks rolled in, and the old iron gate that once divided grief from power was being dismantled piece by piece. Sparks flew as welders cut through the steel joints. Every shriek of metal sounded like release. I stood beside Inspector Laura Keene while she signed off the final clearance papers. "Once it's down," she said, "the city will rebuild with a public access design. No more private override. You'll be surprised how many HOAs are calling to review their systems already." I nodded. Guess Claudette taught the state what happens when control goes unchecked. Keene smiled faintly. "And you reminded them what accountability looks like." Across the street, kids rode bikes where no trespassing signs once stood. Dogs ran loose along the sidewalks. For the first time since Emily's funeral, this neighborhood was alive again. When the last section of iron hit the ground, I walked toward the archway. Only the marble pillars remained, pale and cracked. The workers paused as I knelt by the base and placed a bronze plaque into the waiting frame. It read, "No gate shall close against grace." The same words Emily had once said, half-jokingly, the day we moved in. The oak tree she planted cast its shadow over the plaque, and for a moment, it felt like she was here, watching, proud, free. Behind me, Terrell Nash approached, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You didn't have to pay for that plaque yourself," he said quietly. "I wanted to," I replied. "Some debts aren't meant to be shared." He handed me a cup. "City offered me a job," he said, a shy smile forming. "Emergency infrastructure compliance. Guess I'm done watching from the booth." "That's good," I said, clinking my cup against his. "You earned it." He looked up at the open sky, where the arch used to cast its shadow over everyone. "You know, I used to think rules made people safe. Now I get it. It's people who make rules safe." I smiled. Emily would have liked that. For the next few days, the story spread across the state. News outlets replayed the footage of Claudette's sentencing, the gate inspection, the courtroom confession. Commentators called it the case that rewrote HOA law. Legislators introduced a bill requiring all gated communities in Florida to maintain public emergency overrides. They called it the Mercer provision. Reporters kept calling for interviews, but I only agreed to one, a local segment shot beside the lake at sunset. The anchor asked, "Mr. Mercer, what would your wife think if she could see all this?" I looked at the rippling water and said, "She'd say it shouldn't take tragedy for people to remember how to be human." That line played on every major station that night, but for me, it wasn't about fame, it was about closure, the kind that doesn't erase pain, but transforms it into purpose. On the day the memorial garden opened, residents came in hundreds. Some brought flowers, others just stood quietly, reading the plaque. The city band played soft music, and Terrell gave a small speech about courage and conscience. When it was my turn, I looked at the crowd, people who had once feared letters in their mailboxes, and said, "This isn't the end of a fight. It's proof that power belongs to the people willing to use it for good." Emily didn't get to come home that day, but because of her, no one else will be turned away again. Applause rippled through the garden, not loud or chaotic, just steady, like the wind through leaves. As evening settled, I walked down to the lake, the same place where I had made myself a promise months earlier. The reflection of the open arch shimmered on the water. The community lights glowed soft and even, no longer harsh, no longer guarded. I whispered into the wind, "You made it home, Em." Then I turned toward the camera crew, finishing their final pan shot, and smiled. If you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now, share your story in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from.